Some phone calls arrive years too late, carrying memories you thought you had finally buried. When my phone rang on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, I almost ignored the unfamiliar number. I had spent the last 3 years rebuilding a life that had fallen apart after my engagement ended. My ex had walked away with a simple explanation that she wanted something bigger than the quiet future I offered. She dreamed of expensive vacations, luxury homes, and a fast-moving life. I was just a carpenter who believed happiness could be built with honest work, loyal friends, and a peaceful home. Losing her didn't only break my heart, it shattered my confidence. For months, I questioned whether I had ever been enough for anyone. So when I answered the phone and heard the gentle voice of her mother, every painful memory rushed back at once. She sounded older than I remembered, softer somehow. She explained that a winter storm had destroyed the wooden fence around her backyard. She had asked around town, but every contractor was booked for weeks. Then she remembered me. I had built that very fence years earlier while dating her daughter. Before hanging up, she quietly added something that stayed in my mind all day. She said, "Finish it, and I'll make it worth your while." I assumed she simply meant she would pay me well. I needed the money because work had slowed down recently, so despite the emotional weight of returning to that house, I agreed. Driving there felt like traveling into another lifetime. Every street held memories. I remembered carrying flowers to the front porch, laughing during family barbecues, and believing I had already found the family I would someday call my own. Those dreams disappeared long ago, yet the neighborhood looked exactly the same. Only I had changed. The fence was worse than I expected. Several large sections had collapsed, and old posts had rotted beneath the soil. It wasn't a quick repair. It would take several days. As I unloaded my tools, I noticed how quiet the house had become. The cheerful energy I once remembered had faded. The garden was overgrown. Paint peeled from the porch railings. Time had left its mark on everything. While I worked, her mother occasionally brought out lemonade or sandwiches. She didn't ask uncomfortable questions. She didn't mention her daughter. Instead, she thanked me for taking the job when no one else could. I could see loneliness in her eyes that reminded me of my own. Sometimes people don't need conversation, they simply need someone nearby. As the days passed, neighbors stopped to greet us. Several quietly told me that my ex had moved across the country years earlier after another relationship ended. She rarely called home anymore. Her mother lived alone and struggled with arthritis, making simple household repairs nearly impossible. Hearing that brought unexpected emotions. I wasn't happy about anyone's pain, but I realized life had not unfolded perfectly for anyone involved. Each morning I arrived before sunrise. I measured every board carefully and treated the project as if I were building my own home. Hard work had always been my way of healing. Every nail driven into the wood felt like repairing a small piece of myself. Instead of dwelling on the past, I focused on creating something strong enough to survive future storms. One afternoon, while digging a hole for a new fence post, my shovel struck something solid. It wasn't a rock, it was a small metal box wrapped in old plastic. Curious, I opened it carefully. Inside were faded photographs, handwritten notes, and a tiny silver key attached to a ribbon. I immediately carried the box to her mother. The moment she saw it, tears filled her eyes. She explained that her late husband had buried the memory box decades earlier, after they bought the house together. They had searched for it after he passed away but never found it. Inside were love letters from their early marriage, pictures from their honeymoon, and the key to an old wooden chest stored in the attic. She held the letters against her chest as though embracing her husband once more. Watching that moment reminded me that real love leaves lasting fingerprints long after people are gone. The next day, she invited me into the attic to help open the chest. Dust covered everything, but inside were handmade Christmas ornaments, family photo albums, children's drawings, and a neatly folded quilt her husband had sewn during chemotherapy when he was too weak to work outside. Every object carried a story. Every story carried love. As we sorted through the memories together, I realized healing often begins when someone helps us remember the good instead of only the pain. By the time the fence was nearly complete, I noticed something changing inside me. I no longer drove to the house with anxiety. Instead, I looked forward to seeing someone who genuinely appreciated my work and my company. We shared quiet lunches on the porch. We talked about perseverance, forgiveness, and how life rarely follows the plans we make when we're young. On the final afternoon, I stepped back and admired the finished fence. It stood taller and stronger than the original one I had built years before. Fresh cedar boards glowed warmly beneath the evening sunlight. It wasn't just a fence anymore. It represented second chances and the quiet dignity of doing honest work even when your heart still carries scars. After inspecting every corner, her mother smiled through grateful tears. Then she disappeared inside the house for several minutes. When she returned, she handed me an envelope. I assumed it contained payment for the job, but inside wasn't only money. There was a handwritten letter. She wrote that she had watched me work every day with patience, kindness, and integrity. She admitted she had always hoped I would become part of their family because character mattered more than wealth. She apologized for the pain her daughter had caused me and said some people spend their whole lives searching for the qualities I had shown without realizing they had already found them. Along with generous payment for the fence, she included the deed to a small workshop her late husband had owned across town. The building had been empty for years. She said she wanted someone honest to bring it back to life instead of letting it fall apart. I was speechless. I tried to refuse, insisting it was too much, but she gently explained that her husband had always admired my craftsmanship. Years before his passing, he had once told her that if anyone deserved that workshop someday, it was the young man who repaired broken things without complaining. They had never forgotten. That tiny workshop changed everything. I spent months cleaning, repairing, and restoring it just as carefully as I had rebuilt the fence. Slowly, customers began arriving. Word spread that my work was dependable and fair. Before long, I hired two apprentices who needed fresh starts of their own. Together, we built furniture, repaired homes, and restored old barns that many people believed were beyond saving. Every time I unlocked the workshop each morning, I remembered that unexpected phone call. I had accepted the job because I needed money. Instead, I received something infinitely more valuable. I regained purpose. I rediscovered confidence. Most importantly, I learned that kindness often returns in ways we never expect. I never reunited with my ex, and strangely, I no longer wished for that ending. Some chapters exist only to teach us lessons before closing forever. My future no longer depended on someone choosing me. It depended on becoming the kind of person who continued choosing compassion despite disappointment. Months later, I built a beautiful garden gate for her mother's birthday as a gift. She hugged me with tears in her eyes and quietly said I would always have a place at her table. Family, I realized, isn't always created by marriage or blood. Sometimes it's built through loyalty, forgiveness, and showing up when someone needs you most. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that even painful endings can lead to beautiful new beginnings, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need a little hope today. Before this story ends, I have one small request. Please leave a comment telling us about a time when one unexpected act of kindness completely changed your life. Your story may become the encouragement someone else desperately needs. Life has a remarkable way of rewarding people who continue doing the right thing even after being hurt. A broken fence brought me back to a place I never wanted to visit again, but it also led me toward the future I was always meant to build. Sometimes the greatest blessings don't arrive through perfect plans. They quietly appear disguised as ordinary work, difficult memories, and one simple phone call that changes everything forever.